25 regular minutes and the work session minutes. Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. We have a final reading of the 2026 budget. Questions?
No questions.
None? Okay. This is a new item, so we might have some comments on this one. And so new business, Mr. Baker, and that is to have a discussion and maybe approval for the design of a master plan for a new municipal cemetery located at the end of Adamson Parkway.
You want to start the public hearing on the budget? Or?
Do we do it over the public hearing? We can do a public hearing on it. Why not?
Oh, we can do that in case there's any questions during the work session.
All right. Now y'all don't, y'all stand in line. Open to the public. Any questions, comments, concerns related to FY26 budget? I assume there's copies in the back.
I thought we were gonna talk about the cemetery.
And we will in just a second, but most people haven't seen it yet, so we're just gonna have to bring that up in a minute. Anybody?
There's no changes, right? You didn't make any changes.
What I'll do is I'll just keep that public hearing open up until the time the city has the regular meeting at 7:30, and then we have a discussion, so we can run it concurrent if somebody has issues. New business, item 1, Mr. Becker.
This is a consideration to approve my recommendation to accept the bid submitted by WC Fry Design for the development of a land use master plan for a new municipal cemetery located at the end of Adamson Parkway. For the total amount of $97,000, that would be a master plan design. In the letter, I enumerate the proposed cost. This was bidded out through an RFP on BidNet, bid OP 25004. This was a sole submission through that bid process. However, WC Fry Design has extensive expertise in both public parks and municipal cemeteries, over 35 years of experience. These are municipal, private, historic, and religious cemeteries nationwide. The proposal outlines a comprehensive multi-phase approach to deliver a master plan tailored to tomorrow's needs, addressing critical elements such as burial trains, site access, stormwater management, and long-term cemetery operations. It's a collaborative effort with their team, which includes LF Sloan Consulting Group for cemetery management and business planning, Mika Stanger Incorporated for architectural design, and Gaskins and McGraw Incorporated for civil engineering site surveys. That's a holistic and informed plan approach. The key aspects of this is a 6-phase process involving stakeholder engagement, so that engage community.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
What's
Because it's gonna be very hard for you to understand what it is we're doing without a picture behind it. It's easier for me to just walk this picture around so somebody can have an idea of what property we're talking about. And what we're doing.
Those photos and outlays are in the packet in the back as well. This would involve stakeholder engagement, site surveys, and conceptual design, culminating in a detailed master plan with phasing recommendations and an opinion of probable cost. Specialized services are included are boundary and topographical surveys, wetland delineation and tree inventories, and a strategic planning to align burial offerings and community needs and nationwide trends. The project timeline is roughly 7 months, and they have in the packet that was submitted in the bid, they have several examples of their design plans, a list of other cemeteries that they have submitted and created, as well as public parks, which are across the nation. They also have their hands in libraries and educational facilities, but the pictures include the number of different things they can do as far as cemetery design and some of the concepts they've done in the past.
So years ago, the city of Morrow purchased a 10-acre property on the back of Adamson Parkway. It's adjacent to the existing Morrow Cemetery, which is pretty much operated, years ago it was run by Collie Adamson, but nowadays it's operated by the Morrow Baptist Church. And they're simply out of space. So for our residents who've been here a long time, if you chose to be, and you don't already have an existing plot there, there would be no place in the city of Morrow for you to be buried. That doesn't mean you can't go to Henry County or, you know, other places to do it. The property that we have, you know, it wouldn't use all of it. At least that's the theory. You know, so there's an easement that's a water authority easement on the back of York. And York, if you're in the backyard, you don't want, you know, construction back there, which is kind of why you pick it up so nobody builds on it. You know, but it's a piece of property that you say, you know, we can do something with. So you keep the buffer off of York, you keep the easement that the water authority has, and it basically doubles the size of the existing cemetery. There's some discussion with, a lot of discussion actually over a time period, that you know, at some point Northridge is gonna not be allowed by EPD or somebody to just dump their garbage out on the curb. I know y'all don't think they do that, but they do it twice a week. Take your garbage, throw it out on the curb, you know. And you know, there was a dumpster theory there, and the property that, you know, would make a good site for a dumpster, we own, right? So we can give them a license, an easement, an agreement, whatever it is. You know, whenever they finally reach the conclusion, they have no choice. The homeowners association has said yes a couple times, only to get a lot of pushback, and everybody just likes to throw the stuff out on the curb. But one of these days it will not. Miss Watterson owns, you know, a pretty nice piece of property there. She can keep that and operate that way for, you know, 100 years, you know, but a portion of the property could be attached to that. You could build a really nice subdivision there. You could add some additional property beside Mall Baptist Church, which is in that little green space if they chose. You know, but the idea was to say, how can we look at the properties that we have, and you know, what's the highest and best use? And if we can take and add on to an existing cemetery, the numbers support that, you know, a cemetery you're only buying like 3 feet by 7 feet or something like that. You know, 21 square feet. And, you know, a couple acres, you can do a lot with a couple acres. You know, the question just comes down to, you know, is it something that's plausible for us to do? I personally think, you know, having an opportunity for your citizens is a good idea. A lot of cities do cemeteries. Mara has not, you know, but Colley's is kind of private. If you're looking at what's happening right there on Adamson Parkway, you know, it's like who maintains it, right? You know, so if you set up an enterprise fund, and an enterprise fund basically says the money that's made in that fund basically gets paid into that fund. You know, whether Public Works did it or whether somebody paid the private landscaping company to maintain it, you create enough of a fund so that somebody actually cuts the grass, right? And at some point, you know, as the Baptist Church continues to age, you know, those numbers are going to be less and less, right? Because there'll be less people buried there. So the idea is to say, let's use a portion of the property we have, let's expand it. Let's figure out what it's going to cost by professional people that are civil engineers. Not everybody in the city today may want to be buried in the ground. Some people may want to do some mausoleum type of stuff, right? We know we have an incinerator so that, you know, people who want to be, what do they call that?
Cremated.
Cremated, yeah, that's a good word. You know, so there's lots of opportunities there. There's lots of opportunities to be partners. But you have to have something where you have an idea of what it is you're going to do and what it potentially is going to cost, right? And you don't have to build it all in a day. You know, so that's where we start. And where did some of this come back from? You know, during COVID, you know, we had a number of people who passed away pretty quickly, right? And it's only then that you begin to realize that, you know, there really may not be any space for you, right? So you just go out and you say, all right, you know, we've been looking at the properties that the city owns anyway, to try to figure out what's the highest and best use for them. And, you know, that was a thought process for this one. So, comments? Ms. Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. My first line thoughts really are the city picking this up as another property to manage, so to speak. I'm not, it's hard for me to see it right now. We are struggling with so many layers as we stand on the verge of some great economic development opportunities. You know, we've got a lot going on in the city, and having a municipal cemetery for Morrow, I'm not quite seeing understanding that there are municipal cemeteries across the state. This is true. Many of them being much older, many of them having a historic slant. If it's about highest and best use and, you know, us capturing that value, I mean, has there been conversation about selling the property to the church so that they can maintain the property? No. So with the struggle that we do have, that we're always recycling with code enforcement, you know, wanting grass cut in our public areas, wanting our retail corridors to look a certain way, wanting to energize the CID, and so many layers of things that would require the city to have a good hand in. I don't think I'm not seeing this. That's just my thought.
Fair enough. Mr. Quah.
So, Mr. Becker, tell the public a little bit more about this piece of property. What else can be used for that piece of land? You know, can it be developed to be anything else, or just some kind of restriction to the way the elevation of it is? Just we understand if we have any other option to use for that kind of thing.
I think other development is, you would have some challenges being adjacent to the cemetery itself. Further, there is, just on the preliminary views of it in the floodplain areas, there's a substantial portion of it. With the elevation, it does slope downward into a low area. It creates some challenges, I think. We haven't actually looked at any other plans or anything of that nature, but I think that you would have, just knowing the topography of that area, there's some limitations of what you could do, because there's a certain area of that that's in a 100-year floodplain. So
Okay.
even in the design and the preliminary review of this one, and again, this is just a master plan, this is to see basically a feasibility study to see what you could do and what it would be. That's why they do the holistic approach, to where they bring in people who actually run cemeteries. So the suggestion is hopefully that we try and manage and run a cemetery. But the three-tiered approach that they take is obviously seeing what the needs of the community are first. But there's 3 different phases which attach to stakeholders to see what the interest is, to see what the feasibility of the actual land use would be, and then the final outcome of the design. But as far as what we've looked at in the past to develop that, we really haven't delved into that too much. I just know that the limitations, because of the location adjacent to the cemetery, as well as that low-lying area, it would create a challenge for us.
Yeah, my father is in that cemetery, so I go out there that often. So kind of familiar the way it lay out. I mean, it's in kind of triangle thing.
Got a
So
little map,
it's hard for me to see that we can develop to use for anything else. I understand Ms. Knight is concerned that we have many projects on hand right now, but not a bad idea to, if we could, to develop something for the community. That's my thought. Thank you.
And you know, we do this for the community. I guess, you know, just kind of tracking some of the things that we have going on now. $100,000 for a feasibility study for a cemetery. We have changed our relationship with the Clayton County Water Authority with regard to stormwater. So that is a very pressing and impending relationship that's going to change, where we're going to be taking on a large responsibility. So, you know, we've got a lot of things, you know, on deck, on tap. I guess it's not always a matter of, you know, you have one project, things run concurrently. I do understand that, but I don't know. I guess I'm looking at some of the things that we have as larger concerns that are operational, stormwater being one of them, sanitation being one of them. This is, you know, conversations coming out of the budget. You know, for those of you all who have had a chance to look at the budget, you know, we do a transfer from the general fund to cover sanitation. So we've got some things that we have to work out operationally, and adding on the management of a cemetery. I don't know if the timing is right, highest and best use, I can understand, but I don't know about the timing right now. Like I said, we've got some big ticket items that we really need to pay attention to. We've got the convocation center coming online, and being a good steward of the Morrow Center, knowing that there are a lot of big ticket items in the Morrow Center that have to be addressed to keep that municipal facility going in the right direction. So that's my thought.
Ms. Dean.
Well, for me, I go back to when we had conversations about properties that we own and properties that we were renting out and all of that. And so I remember the comment is that, you know, the city shouldn't be in the real estate business of owning property, so much property. So for me, this cemetery has always been private sector in my mind. I've never realized or thought that cities own cemeteries, and you know, with the you know, the building of it and the designing of it and the maintenance or the what do you call it, the care, no, what do they call it, forever care, whatever that word is.
In perpetuity.
No. Perpetual, thank you. Care for cemeteries. I know I have family in a little country town in Black Hawk, Mississippi, where family members send money every year to pay for our cemetery. Take care of the cemetery because that's where, you know, the whole community's family is. And to think about the city being responsible for, you know, first of all, the investment in having the study done and finding out what problems there is, you know, which this is not we're not committed to this. This is just an idea. I don't believe that, for me, it doesn't fit the bill of being something that is in the best interest for the city to take on. As Councilwoman Knight says, right now, we're finishing off the Recreation and Community Center on Reynolds Road. 97,000 could do quite a few things over there. The gymnasium, and you know, we have quite a few things over there that needs to be done. I think we have a playground project coming up over here that's gonna cost in the what, 800,000 growing amount, and these are all both community projects, and they're dealing with living people, not the ones who have gone on to glory, so to speak. I think those should be handled by private entities, not municipal, because I see issues with that because of a discussion that so many plots can be bought up in advance, and I can see that being a problem. And I just think now is not the time for a cemetery in the city of Morrow. We own the property, so it will be there until we decide what we want to do with it. And that's what I think about it.
Ms. Wynn.
Is she there?
Yeah. Ms. Wynn? You're on mute, ma'am.
She's 12 hours behind, so this is breakfast.
She's taking a little nap.
I believe that the city function is taking care of the well-being of the resident, but also fulfilling and dignify the burial and offer a space for embracing the citizen that passed away. With my experience that the past years that I've been through, going to funerals almost every month, and I saw that there's many families in the community who would like to have to bury their death one, or even have a mausoleum where they can store the family members cremation in the memorial area. But unfortunately, that our cemetery doesn't have the capacity for that. So with this proposal, it would give our citizen family have a more choice for burying their death one, and for remembering and visit their family members. With this, I know there's concern that, there's a stretch for the city to manage this operation, but I can see this multifaceted layer too, that we could still operate and transfer later on. If that could be another idea we can have later. But so far, the proposal is very thorough, and different options laid out, and because of the concern of the near New York area, so I'm not sure in the future development it would be good for other residential or mixed use area for that type of land right there too. And then the example that have shown here, the same cremation garden at the Clinton Township is very nice too. And of course there's other, like the garden one is nice. That's my my input.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. The city does a lot of different things, but believe it or not, a number of things that we do, we hire a contractor for, right? Like, we're working on a building, but we're not putting the building together. We hire a contractor to put the building together. Eventually we'll open it. And some of that will be us, and some of that will be somebody else. When someone has a need, I think if we can provide it, we should try. The odds of you going out there and digging grandpa up and moving him are not very good. In other countries they do it a lot, right? Or they add a stack on top of each other and do these other things. We don't. So if we can reasonably expand onto something that's already there, I think it handles a couple questions. The people in the back of York really don't want to see a construction project behind their house, right? You don't have to worry about this cemetery. They're not going to bother anybody, right? And we can make those things work out pretty well. It's not a bad business decision. When you start to look at, say, an acre being 209 by 209, it's about 43,000 square feet, and an average cemetery lot is going to be like 24 feet. You can have a pretty large number of lots, and you don't have to build it all out in a day. But having a design is not the worst thing in the world. And God forbid, another COVID type of environment happens. So, the city's not in such a desperate condition, that we can't do more than one thing at the same time. What you would do is set it up as an enterprise fund, so the money that goes in it comes out of it. Pretty easy stuff. Jonesboro runs one, a couple other people do. We just haven't, right? But up until very recently, you always had an option. You just don't have that option anymore, right? If you walk through that cemetery, which I have recently, kind of the who's there, right? You got the Treadaways, you got the Folsoms, you've got Duffys, you've got pretty much, everybody that helped, build Morrow sitting right in there. And in recent memory, you have others that have gotten here in recent memory, and they're buried there as well. What I like about that cemetery, maybe different than say 1941 or Fairview, for example, is a lot of these commercial areas don't let you have a park bench for you to mourn, right? You don't have anything. You got to put the little plaque plastic stands there and all that, very commercialized. You know, where here, you know, you can, you know, give mom and dad whatever respect you so choose, you know, and go through life. So, you know, the world doesn't end in a day if we have to do it or don't have to do it, but it is something where, you know, what's the old saying, we're going to take care of you from cradle to grave? Why not? So we'll open floor to discussion. So,
Mayor, Mayor, I understand about,
not
you know,
Dorothy's grave though. Just,
I
just
understand that some people, you know, have certain or different opinions about how they are gonna be, you know, put to rest, as they say. But I don't feel that that is the responsibility of the city. And for us to take that responsibility and pass it on to our citizens who may or may not want to be buried there, I don't believe that that should be something that we make that decision for some people to be buried next to their whatever, you know, or have their own place. We're being specific about where people are gonna be buried when there are many
well, I'm being
cemeteries.
specific. I think we're
Where
giving them options.
my sister and my mother is on Terra Boulevard, we have a nice bench there. We have a place to put the flowers there for those that believe in that. But to take on a project like this, using land that the city purchased for what I think was to find a way to connect properties or streets, one street to another street, to help alleviate some of the traffic.
Right. Now, we had a conversation about that just earlier.
Yeah.
There's no way to tie in Duffy Drive to Adamson Parkway that associates with this property. It's on the right-hand side. If you try to tie in, say, Meadowbrook, you'd have to go
Well, there was
through-
also the pathway, because we
Well,
were,
but your pathway, as
we
we
were
explained
talking about
earlier,
that.
was to tie in, you've got the small park that we already own in the subdivision for York. It's 25 feet to Duffy Drive. That would be the fastest point between the two to be able to get, you know, if you want to say golf cart, if you will, to be able to get into that. And then everything else is on the right-hand side. So this is on the left-hand side, right? You know, if somebody was saying from a plausibility standpoint, and say you just wanted to build additional residential, you know, again, certain portions of that, you know, that Argonne, you know, dead end there that's in front of, that's dealing with Shirley Waterson's property, or a portion of church, sure, you know. But as you get further down, I don't know that you want to own the house right behind the cemetery. You know, historically, those are not houses that sell well. So you got to create a buffer, right? And one cemetery is there already. We're not making that up, right? It exists, right? So if you just happen to walk that cemetery and just say, I'm going to double its size, for lack of a better word, right? You've not really impacted anybody in a negative way, right? York should be happy. Shirley Waterson, you know, got 10 acres of her own already. You'd have another 5 at least to go with it. Very happy. You know, the church, the Baptist church, owns the cemetery. I doubt they're complaining too much, right? I've heard no complaints from anybody in the cemetery. Just want you to officially know that. No complaints from anybody in the cemetery, you know. But if somebody wants to volunteer to take those complaints, we'll let them know who you are and where you live.
So, if I may,
yeah,
because, you
go
know,
ahead.
you do kind of leave the subject sometimes and add something else.
It happens.
But, so, there again, or here again, the city taking this on as opposed to a private, you know, entity. That's usually, that responsibility would be, you know, their decisions on, you know, we talked about it, there are things that the city can do that private, you know, entities cannot do, but the city have the authority to grant that to those private individuals.
Sure.
The amount of money and whatever we're going to run into in the process of discovery on the limb for trying to make this happen as the expenses will go up, which we know, you know, to build a house starts out at this price, and then by the time you finish, you add on another 50 to 100 or $150,000. We're talking building mausoleums and all of that type of thing.
No, we didn't say that.
I mean, if you're talking about
You know,
boxes,
you have options in there.
right?
But,
But
you know, you
but
can
you
have
have to
options
you have to
with
get the land
partner, well,
first
you
of
own
all,
the land.
right?
Right.
To grade it and all of that to be able to do this.
But a good preliminary plan by people who do this for a living,
right.
you know, takes a lot of the ambiguity out of it, right? You have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish. You have an idea of how long this might take, right? It puts you in the driver's seat, and it also then allocates whatever property you're going to allocate to this versus property you're going to allocate to something else. And you can just say, look, you know, this part right here is going to go into the cemetery. This part right here is going to go into maybe future land construction for residential. This will go to
Well,
the
aren't you
people in
gonna
the
get
back of whatever.
you're gonna get the most feasible parts for the cemetery, because the rest of it is probably drainage problems and other things that can't be used for
Well, you
anything.
wouldn't, you know.
There's an
are you-
easement and a floodplain
Right,
on the
and we
property,
know
so-
where both of those are. You know, but again, you're not grabbing 10 acres, right? All we're basically saying is let's expand what we
Does it
have.
say 6.9?
Well,
in here or
I
something?
think ours is 11 or something like
I
that.
mean,
It's
The
there's-
pretty
study
low.
would encompass that, and this is the preliminary study, so yeah, I would see the
Well,
feasibility
you wanna,
plan.
you obviously wanna study a little bit outside the boundary of where you're gonna be, so you kinda know what's going on, right? It just makes logical sense. A study doesn't hurt anybody, right? Is it the highest and best use of and plausibility of this property? It is, it really is, yeah. Letting the Wild West have it and basically let somebody else set the pace, you know, and you go, okay, you know, but you can do it too. You know, it's been done a lot.
If I might add
Go
another comment as well, you know, just referencing enterprise funds, you know, sanitation is an enterprise fund. And, you know, we typically support sanitation from the city's general fund every year. Setting up another enterprise fund for potentially the management of a cemetery, what feasible revenue is continuous that makes that enterprise fund successful? Once you sell a land plot, you sold the plot.
When you sell 1,000 plots, because that's how much is in an acre. You know,
And again, being an
depending on
enterprise
what you
fund,
priced them at. Now, if you priced them affordably, let's say the church itself might be 1,000, 1,500. You know, you've already got all your money back at that point, just on 1 acre, right? Now, we're not anticipating 1,000 people kicking over and watering them off, right? So it's not quite that low. You know, so it's like that. But you can't confuse two enterprise funds, right? And let's just walk into that. So if somebody's going to say, we pick up residential, not commercial sanitation, residential sanitation, right? You know, the audience is sitting out here. We subsidize your residential sanitation because we choose to, right? So if we sent you a real bill for what it cost, you'd be paying roughly $100 every quarter.
if it was still.
120. Where are we? What number is it?
135 probably.
135. Some ridiculous
Again,
number.
if it was
Right.
backdoor
You know,
service,
so, well, it doesn't matter what the service is.
curbside
The
is,
bottom line is,
curbside
you know,
is
we are offering
significantly
you,
lower.
as a citizen, a hell of a deal. Doesn't matter what fund it comes out of. The bottom line is, you know, we're figuring out how to pay for it, right? And me, not only do I support it, I will continue to support it.
Yeah, I mean, you get a bill in the mail, but
But
you
you
also
can't
pay
say that
taxes.
that's the hard part of an enterprise fund. No, we're making a political decision to subsidize residential sanitation, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. It is. You know, just like we make a decision to have a homestead exemption of $200,000. We don't have to do that, right? But not only did we do it, we had you vote on it to make it so that nobody that was sitting up here could change their mind. Again, a way to keep your money in your pocket.
The cost savings with the homestead exemption and the taxes that we do collect, those who do pay the taxes, they are still subsidizing trash pickup.
Yeah. So does
So you get
anybody
a
have
bill
a
in the
problem with
mail,
that?
but additionally, through, you know, the general fund,
But
we subsidize.
that's
everything
when a
additional.
city operates a certain way, which we've managed to do for quite some time. We try to have growth. We try to build new buildings, new subdivisions, things along those lines, so that we can continue to have nice things. Just a fact, okay? However you want to call the fund, though, you know, the political answer is still, we are assisting you in paying the bill,
So,
which is awesome.
Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
we discussed, I think at the last meeting and prior to the, CID.
Yes,
So that's a huge thing for the city. That's gonna,
for South Lake Mall. it's
South
huge.
Lake Mall, that's
For
gonna,
everyone else, it would have no impact
but
whatsoever.
it's going to enhance that area and that's gonna
I
help the city.
pray that it does, yes, ma'am.
So, doing that, I think that should be the focus right now, rather than adding something to this. I think Councilwoman Nguyen said, can we find an alternative financing for the CID?
I don't think it was the financing for the CID, there's a financing method in there. The idea was, is there additional revenue sources we can use to be able to fund additional things for the city itself?
Right, so, here again, is there an alternative financing that somebody can do this project instead of the city? Because I truly don't feel that it is in the best interest of the citizens to do this. There again, you're looking at a few people who wanna bury their parents or their whatever together. And in my lifetime, you know the cemeteries that are here, that are there, and you don't have that option. And for us to have that, decide to have an option to create a municipal cemetery in a city that has a population of whatever we are right now, and there is one cemetery, and it's, what I understand is that maximum
Yeah. it's full.
capacity.
It's full in the capacity as we know.
So,
Yeah, I mean-
there are other, cemeteries.
Yeah,
And if people wanna, private entity wanna take that on, I think private people should take that on, not the city. I don't think the city should endeavor.
Well,
Yeah, to me, it's just it's not a must. It's a choice whether we here at this dial decide to do it or not. And I guess it's okay either way, but it's just that to do things, we have to do things for people who live in the city, or I guess going to live in that cemetery in the future, trying to take care of them. But it's just a choice.
Okay. I'm gonna open the floor to discussion, and not because most of you are closer to the cemetery than me, but I'm just curious, right? You own a piece of property, and like I said, it is not a bad use of a portion of it. I wouldn't say it's a good use for all of it. It's something well within our ability to do, right? You hire an expert, it's not that complicated. And there's somebody over there burying people regularly anyway, so it's not like you have to go get a new bucket truck or all that other stuff. Our friends over at the Baptist Church already have most of that stuff figured out. But any comments from the audience?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wayne?
Yes, Mayor, Council. I'm trying to wrap my thoughts around why would we want to get in the business of a municipal cemetery as a city. I understand the land use, Mr. Baker. I understand that it is in the floodplain. There's a portion of it in the floodplain. But even that, you risk the opportunity where if you have a flood, you're gonna have coffins floating down the damn road like you did in New Orleans.
It's not that bad, but I understand.
But spending $97,000 on the feasibility study, did we shop this thing around?
It was put out to bid. It's the only group that came in. it's obviously not a business everybody's dying to get into, you know,
I just
pun
can't
intended.
wrap myself around, you know, the city getting in the business of managing the cemetery. You know, we're already stretched thin. Now, if we was in Podunk, Mississippi, and this dog said, population 12, everybody in there, they're relatives. You know, I could see it, but, maybe I need a little bit more education on it, Mr. Baker. I just, Mayor, that's a hard one.
Fair enough. Other comments?
Yes. You know, when, last meeting, when we were talking about the renovation going into the mall, you know, to me, that needs to be done truly. I mean, I've lived here on the property since 2001, and it's been the same. And so when we started talking about, you know, upgrading, I mean, I was really excited, but I don't know where this cemetery bit came in, because that to me, that's a lot of money for a study. I don't like that kind of stuff. Priorities for me is the mall, because we've got progress going there. And if we say we can put this, like we said with Meadowbrook, it's not going away. The property is there. But I think in amassing a lot of spending right now, that cemetery is low on the totem pole at the very bottom. I think and I know we can do a lot of things, but you know, it's just getting hard. And that to me, that's just a lot of money. It's a lot of responsibility. I know I had a cousin that was doing our graves, but when she passed, I had to go to Texas to do and clean, and it's a lot of responsibility. And for the past 5 years, we've been going over there, putting flags on the graves. So, you know, I know it's a lot of responsibility to keep it clean. And I don't know, Brandon, it would be, I guess, in his, but you would have to have somebody dedicated solely to that one job, because it's a lot. You know, when you're dealing with money, you can't have a bunch of people going in there and charging this or charging that, taking cash here, taking, you know, checks there. It's just, to me, it's just a lot of responsibility for the city to take. Thank you.
Right. Other comments? Ms. McDonald, go ahead.
Do I have to? I see both sides of the story. My grandfather donated the land for the Oakwood City Cemetery in Oakwood, Georgia. But there are rules, like, you know, you keep gravel, you do this, you do that. There won't be any tacky stuff on it. Even the city of Gainesville has a big cemetery. I had a cousin that went put a doll there, something tacky, something smoking a cigarette and whatever. And I mean, they got a letter where they could be fined. It would have to have a lot of restrictions to it, or it's going to be someplace it's going to be an eyesore, because it already is teetering on that.
Fair enough.
I mean, that's my opinion.
No, that's fine.
If
That's
you
what we're
can
asking
put a
for.
lot of strict rules, all this stuff, and not, you may if you want to, it's you will, you know. And they can fix it where if they pass away, another family, you know, all their family's gone, it will still look good because of the way the gravel, all that stuff's done. But other than that, I think you're gonna end up with a big mess.
Ms. Chair.
I rode over there today, and I didn't realize it went back to the side. And, I can see putting a cemetery there. I can see us outsourcing it to someone else to do. And what's this guy charging? Is it $100,000?
Yeah, it's a feasibility study, but yes, it
I mean, it's
phases.
gonna all be cleared totally. Okay, when they built Forest Hill, the Forest Park, it was nowhere near
what they did is they came in and they sold plots to families, because the three that I can think of that are up there were basically already full. And so they built Forest Hills, and like I said, they sold, my dad bought 10 lots. And it ended up that his mother and daddy are there, and then my mother's sister and, two sisters and a husband are buried there, and there was enough room for all the kids. And, you know, to me, you can sell plots in there to help offset the cost
Right.
to start with.
That's caught our mind. You know, it really just comes down to, is it something we want to do? I think it is the highest and best use of the property or portion of it.
I wouldn't want a house that backs up to the cemetery.
That's correct. That's why most people don't. So you look at it and go, that would be not something we have.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't wanna, you have to drive, if you're going home at night, you wanna go by the cemetery on the way down into this place that's dead end.
Well, right now it's a cul-de-sac, so let's hope we're not going down there, so. Wayne, okay.
So Mayor, I guess my question is, you talked about an enterprise fund earlier.
Yeah, basically, all the money goes in and comes out and it stays in one particular fund. They just call it enterprise fund. Think of it as a separate bank,
Separate it from the general fund as we do sanitation.
right? Which of course, that's true. We do support the enterprise fund for sanitation.
Mr. Mayor, can I add, one additional point?
Sure.
I can see the cemeteries could be the economic impact in a way, because this is attracting tourism for people want to visit their family from outside of town. And also, you know, this could preserving heritage. So it, in a way, or it could be urban development plan for green space, in the eco environment system. So I don't know if there's a source that we could use in, for tourism for this cemetery. There's an option for us to explore into it too, if the fund is concerning.
Nobody's gonna tour cemetery.
Yeah. Well, this one's kind of different. Any other comments? Go ahead.
I agree with, both sides. I'm sure there's a need. The need may not be as pressing as it's being made out to be right now. On the other hand, it's not the city's job to provide. The city's job is to facilitate. This guy wants to build a cemetery. We know some people that are gonna need one. Let's help facilitate it through zoning, through, approvals and whatever. That's the city's job.
Now years ago, there was an offer from at least two parties to build a cemetery in a similar location. You know, the question is, did you want to give up that kind of control? You know you control the zone, right? And you own the property, so you can kind of allocate certain things. So does that change the question or the answer? So let's say we step out for just a minute, and let's say you decide you want to help us build a cemetery. We create a partnership, whatever that means, and we allocate, sell, however you want to do it. And now we're in the partnership business. You're in the cemetery business. We're just trying to recover the land cost originally. We got $100,000 in 10 acres. That's been done. It was done years ago. No matter who's out there, somebody's going to have to come up with a preliminary plan. Right? You just can't start cutting stuff. And then you got zoning and other types of things. There are people we could probably reach out to ask that. Now, once you give up that kind of control, you're not going to be able to control pricing or anything like that. Right? So it's and as you pass away, we know the price goes up, right? So I'm planning, I get a good deal, I'm dead, I don't. Okay. Does that change the mind of anybody?
No, that's how it goes for everything.
No, I'm just asking.
That's how
So if you're worried about the city or you're worried about the city's funds, if we find partners, does that change a lot of the maybes or no's to a yes? Which is what you're advocating, right?
Right, if we find someone to possibly.
Yeah, well, at this point, we haven't asked anybody, but it's not that we can't, right? I mean, a lot of churches,
This is 2 acres that you wanna use to do it?
on this one, not knowing exactly all the sizes, what I would say is the original property's closer to 11, the area in the back, let's put it in that plot. It's gonna be 2-3 acres
It sounds
top.
like that's an idea ideal use of the land.
Mhm.
But, just from my experience being in the city and seeing, how just managing all that we manage, we're never in abundance of, hey, Brandon, we gotta find something for you to do, because you just don't have nothing to do today. You know what I'm saying? We're never
no.
running out of,
Familiar with that.
you know what I'm saying? So, it's just the thought of taking on something else that's not gonna be a continual revenue farm. It's gonna
Right,
be
very
a
slow.
stop, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
It may start off slow, and it may continue, and then it's gonna stop, you know?
Hmm.
So we're thinking long-term. But right now, you're saying $100,000 for 10 acres?
Well, we paid 100 for the
Right.
acres. Right now, we're looking at a feasibility study, and that cost,
Right,
basically,
right. What
by
I'm
putting
saying-
the numbers out there, is $97,000.
So what I'm saying is, right now, you could make a very easy profit on the land that you have, and then move on to something else.
Yes, we could.
You know what I'm saying? And then someone else could step in and take on the job of managing and, you know.
Well, I think that would be the partnership I would look for. I don't know if I'd give up 100% control. I would just simply say, your portion is, you come up with the feasibility study. We come up with some way to do profit sharing. And if you're digging holes in the ground or doing leasing of cemeteries, then that's on you. You know, and we have some control. And that gives us parameters as to what you're looking for in a partner,
The
right?
municipality has the power to, set zoning standards, so that's, for the control that you believe you want to maintain, there's already systems in place.
Well, your zoning will give you
for us
control, but
to
your partnership would
make
give you
sure.
contractual control. And that would be worth something.
That sounds more feasible.
Thoughts? Good? Sound better?
Yes. And I'll be the first to admit, there is a need.
I thought you were about to say you'd be the first to go, and I'm like, come on, Wayne, we're not looking for volunteers.
It is full over there. We was just there a week or so ago, and it's full. There are a lot of great sites.
Well, here's what we'll do, because again, we're putting it on the agenda. We wanted to have good conversations. This is as good a place as any to do it. And, you know, let's take what we've heard under advisement and see if we can't find some partners that might create, some opportunity. Worst case scenario, we go look.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
I'm
just to
sorry.
reiterate, this is a feasibility study. There are it's a holistic approach, and there are the design plans, the land usage, and if it is feasible for the usage of the land, and the operations of it. So, I don't want anybody to get the assumption, as I previously stated, that we're trying to manage a cemetery. I don't have a single person in this city that I want to try and have to manage it, least of all me. But this is the idea is you go through the feasibility study to see, to the stakeholders, which we would engage the community to see what they need, if there is a need, etc. If the land is feasible for that, as well as when you hopefully pass that off with the controls of the city being a municipal cemetery to someone to own, operate, not own, but operate and to manage and to do the sales of those plots, because that's not the thrust of this plan here initially. So it is strictly a feasibility. And if it comes to a point, as to the mayor said and several others, that you see that it is something that we can do with the cemetery operation, perhaps we do enter into an agreement. But now we have some leverage with that agreement to say, this is what we know we can do, and this is what we this is our concept of what we like to do. And we can conceptually lay it out for them and say, these are the things we want to do. Do we want to have a veterans portion? Do we want to have a mausoleum? Do we want to have the burial plots? So I think this just gives us the opportunity to determine if that is something that we can do with that land. And if so, then how do we
And
proceed once you do the
One of the
study?
things that's important is there's some state law issues in here as well. So if you just decided to throw a cemetery out in the middle of nowhere, it's a whole different ballgame. If you're expanding an existing cemetery, it's much, much easier. So having a city as a partner versus the private sector is a completely different animal. But we'll defer and see if we can't find some partners and see if we have
I'm
answers.
sorry, I interrupted, Mayor.
Go ahead.
What Mr. Baker just said, can we recoup the 100,000?
I think if you enter into a partnership, that would be the goal is, there's gonna be.
That zoning would be
partnership
very
would be
complicated to
tough.
get without us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then if you just did 24 feet divided by 43,000 feet, you got 1,200 plots.
Right.
There's real money there.
So
So
that brings
that's
us
in
to
addition-
200,000.
that-
If the property was bought at 100,000 and we're doing a study to find a
97,000.
partnership, that's 197,000, so.
That's just
Well,
So,
but also remember, I do think the value of the remnants that we would not be putting into this would exceed the value of your original 100,000. I think you'll get that out of it, right? So that's just residential land, and that's 4 units per acre, right? Using comparables of what we just did recently. So, but again, the good news, as Quap said, that we don't have to make a decision tonight. The main goal is to look at it, have a good conversation, and to say there is a legitimate need. We do know that there are seniors who have requested, nobody in specific need, but somebody that just wants to be buried modular. That's fair. I don't see that as a problem. And then we'll try to come up with better answers. Okay. Let's see what else we got. We got coffee, so if you want to grab you a cup of coffee, we got about 5 minutes, and then we'll go into the regular meeting at 7:30 for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. And the gentleman who passed away this last week that was up there,
Marvin,
Martin, just keep him in your prayers, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Approval and adoption of the May 27th regular meeting minutes and the May 27th work session minutes. Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve?
So,
Do I hear a second? Motion properly seconded. All those in favor say aye. Ms. Knight? Mr. Quah?
aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
And Ms. Wynn?
Aye.
Perfect, okay. We've had the public hearing for the budget on the FY26 budget. It's been open for probably about an hour. Any additional comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, this formalizes it. This is the second reading and adoption. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I hear a second? Motion properly seconded. All those in favor say aye. Ms. Knight? Mr. Quah?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
And Ms. Wynn?
Aye.
New business, we're gonna defer the new business. It was a good conversation. We got some options there. I did the public hearing, but I also did the budget, which was the ordinance 2503. And then we've got an executive session for personnel matters. So we'll open the floor for discussion. Anything related to general comments from the audience? Right?
I just want you all to know, it's so exhilarating seeing all these businesses opening up. And the food was great today. I got full very early. Can't wait till the other hotel open up. Mayor, council, city manager, department heads, you guys are doing a hell of a job.
Excellent. Anybody else?
well, we can't forget that we've got Freedom Fest coming up, and we've got Juneteenth coming up, and we've got a lot of stuff, so, Morrow keeps moving, so we're doing great things.
And we got a text that said they put construction equipment on the Quick Trip location literally while we were in this meeting, I guess. So, and I think they'll start knocking down the building to the right is what they heard. So, if it's true, it was me. If it's not true, it was Baker.
She has something.
Sorry. Benita.
I would just like to dovetail about what Mr. Collins just said. I am so excited about our new businesses and so proud of the city of Marvin. And I am looking forward to us really doing great things. The people are wonderful, the owners, and you've got good partnership all over the city of Marvin with Clayton County. So thank you so much for all the hard work that you all do.
Anybody else? We're good? Comments from the council, Ms. Knight?
No comments.
Mr.
Thank you
Clark.
all for coming.
No comments.
Ms. Dean?
Yeah, I would just like to make the comment about Mr. Marvin Chisnell. he had a very nice service, thanks to Miss Lana LeBay, gathering the people that knew him, served alongside of him as Geezer Squad. Two are sitting in the back there, and and if you saw his son, you would think you were looking at Marvin because he was the spitting image. I didn't recognize him, but he was standing with his back to me, and when he turned around, I was like, you know, it took me back because he looks just like Marvin, just like him. So finally, Mr. Chisnell is no longer suffering in the fire department. His son wanted to say thank you all for the many trips that you all made to his house to assist him when he was, you know, not able to help himself. So I appreciate that because we know what you all did for him, and I really appreciate the care that you all gave him and took care of him. And by the way, the box is still there, so. Right, okay. And that's it.
Miss Winnie.
No comment, thank you.
I got a couple. So, you know, my understanding is the Marriott will open probably in February. So you saw some very powerful players there in the construction business and the hotel business today. The last time I was in the Bennigan's building, it was a disaster. All right, so the old restaurant that's right there, you know, you had the Bennigan's and Steak and Ale, and you know, they didn't knock the whole building down, but they pretty much gutted it and started over, and I think they did a phenomenal job. You know, so, you know, I think hopefully, you know, that business will go as well as we think it will, and that will put extra pressure on the adjacent building right next to it to be able to even do more. So I feel very good there. So I think there's a lot of good things moving. As they mentioned, the Quick Trip. Additionally, you know, a while back we gave a conditional use to what they call a true hotel, which is a Hilton hotel. And my understanding, those people were standing there today, and the individual that has that permit believes he will start soon. Right? So again, you know, everyone's sitting there and they realize as this building opens, the opportunities there, and you know, that one more time takes, you know, a rather vacant piece of property or a dilapidated piece of property that's been in the city for a long time and puts it in play. You know, so you know, that is one thing to just take a restaurant that's been there before and put somebody else in it. It's another thing to have one that's had a door closed for 15 years. You know, that had big pools of water and all these other things, or vacant property that's been underutilized, underperforming. And the Quick Trip, one of these days when everything finally does go the way it's supposed to, you know, that's one of the last brownfield development sites in the city. Right? You know, maybe not everybody's enthralled with Quick Trip, but it is the best brand in the gas business today. You know, that's not part of the trucking business. But remember, you know, it had free-floating gasoline in the water tank. It was a Shell gas station. You know, that took assemblage of property. That took somebody being able to, you know, write off that type of risk, and to be able to get, you know, a pretty phenomenal, you know, development there. There are not many left, right? Those that were still old gas stations, all those tanks have been pulled out, those have been cleaned up. You know, so this is your last one.
Except for the one at the corner of Morrow Road and Phillips Drive.
Right. But they took that tank out, right? And the only reason that property is not in place, it doesn't have sewer. That's not a brownfield site, right? So that part is completely different.
So it's been remediated and all that good stuff.
On that one, the test tanks that they pulled out of there was not a plume. So it wasn't as old as most people think. Some of these others were. So that's, I mean, you know, kudos to your staff, kudos to everybody that's out there. And with the different people that were out there today, the business community believes you, right? So Morrow is on the move. We do have to make sure there was at least one less than admirable opportunity that, you know, showed up this week. And, you know, we sent a packing because, you know, we went through a lot of effort to make good things happen. And the roaches are starting to come out of the woodwork thinking that that's the best you deserve. You know, and we just kind of sent them back to wherever they came from and said, that's not us. So We are gonna go, I need a motion to go into executive session. It's a personnel matter, it shouldn't take very long.
So,
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Ms. Knight?
Aye.
Mr. Quah?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Wynn?
Aye.
And then we will come back. I don't anticipate it being forever. I don't anticipate it being super fancy. But if you're here, you're here. If you're not, good to see you.
Take too long to talk.
Gotcha.
It's raining outside now. It's raining.
Super rainy.
It's them tears.
So unless you're gonna buy.
Man, y'all hung in there like a rusty fish hook.
Whoa.
All right, do I hear a motion to exit executive session?
So move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Ms. Knight?
Aye.
Mr. Quah?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
And Ms. Wynn? She's still.
Aye.
Okay, she transferred over. Okay, so we're back into the final sections of the original city council meeting. And we had one item to vote on. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion properly seconded. All those in favor say aye. Ms. Knight?
Aye.
Mr. Quah?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
And Ms. Wynn?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Good night, and we're adjourned.